Haven't done a lot of baby stuff in these last couple of weeks, so today I thought I would talk about what happens when you go home. I have done this before, but I just think there's a couple of little nitty-gritty details that are valuable to hear over and over. And of course, if I am not your doctor, ask your doctor. They might have different nitty-gritty details of their own to tell you, or different parameters of things that they are worried about or not. But when I send people home, like I just did at the hospital when I did rounds, after a C-section of a very beautiful big baby with a big head of hair, I kind of go through a couple of the same things with almost everyone, with a couple of different changes just based on if you had a C-section or a vaginal delivery. One, let's talk physical first. What is very common when you go home is that the otherwise heavy period-like bleeding that you may have had at the hospital with an occasional clot may become heavier because you are more mobile, you're walking around more, your uterus sometimes relaxes in response to you being more active. As I joke, you're in a bigger cocoon. So if you all of a sudden go home, you're a little bit more active, you felt pretty good, and then you notice a big clot come out alone, not followed by a lot of heavy bleeding gushing out, the likelihood is you are okay. Now again, ask your doctor if they have different parameters, but I typically tell patients if it's one clot once that's big without gushing blood afterwards, I don't know why I'm whispering gushing, then I'm not worried. But if you have repetitive clots or you are soaking through a pad every 30 minutes, that is our index for too much bleeding, please call your doctor. And then she may say, come to the office or go to the emergency room, just depending on what's going on. But again, if it's followed on the heels of having just been very physically active because you felt good, you took a long walk, you did a lot of laundry, things that I would tell you not to do anyway right away, that is sometimes your body's response. Why? We don't know. I think that many of us will surmise that it's because all of the oxygen is going to different parts of your body, like if you're exercising, and so there's not as much of everything going to your uterus, and so the ability of your uterus to stay contracted is less, so your uterus relaxes, fills up with a clot, and then it squirts it out. So that's one, is heavier bleeding. Two, your feet, especially if this is your first baby, will get far more puffy and swollen than when you're at the hospital. You thought that baby came out, you're gonna lose weight, you're gonna get rid of all your fluid. No, sorry. Most likely for that first week or so, your feet will get more puffy and swollen. I used to joke that my feet were like Shrek. Not cankles, calf ankles, but thankles, thigh ankles. Not a great look. The best thing you can do is elevate them and hydrate, because basically all the fluid that was in your system is now seeping out of your blood vessels because your blood vessels are a little bit leaky, and it gets into your tissue, so into your hands, your feet, your ankles, and that's what the swelling and edema is what we call it is. So the best thing you can do is hydrate, because the more you hydrate with water, you will then mobilize the fluid back into your blood supply, which then gets filtered through your kidneys and peed out. That's kind of the easy way to describe it. Now, when would I be worried about swelling? I'd be worried if swelling really doesn't seem to abate over a week or two, or if it becomes sudden onset, not only your feet and your ankles, but people look at your face and say it's very swollen, or if it's associated with other symptoms of preeclampsia, one of which is the third thing that I tell people, which is a headache. It is very common to have a headache postpartum because your hormones have just taken a dip. So much like right before your period where your estrogen levels drop and you get that pre-period migraine sometimes, your all of a sudden drop in estrogen will potentially precipitate a headache, especially if you're nursing. We notice that when women are latching, again, a low estrogen state, they will sometimes have a terrible headache and almost like a shaking cold chill that will feel terrible. And that is often due to, again, the hormone shifts, especially from lactation. Now, am I worried about that headache? Well, I typically tend to tell patients, in the absence of having had high blood pressure or preeclampsia, I'm less concerned about it, but I would like it to be relieved by ibuprofen, Tylenol, or maybe even caffeine. And if you try those things and it's not better, please call your doctor, because it could be a sign of preeclampsia, postpartum even, especially if it's also bad headache, not resolved, also associated with, for example, edema or swelling of your ankles and feet and calves. So again, headache, very common. Shaking chills, very common. Try the ibuprofen, the Tylenol, and make sure you've tried some caffeine if you're drinking caffeine, and that will often alleviate it. And if not, you call your doctor if that headache does not get better. And if the shaking chills are associated with a fever, a temperature, then you should also call your doctor. Boobs. Your boobs will hurt at some point. Either if you are not breastfeeding, then it will hurt because potentially it'll fill up with milk, in which case you do not want to shimmy those things around. You don't want any stimulation. You want to basically put things that will stop stimulation. Tight bra, no touching, no hot shower. Some people will say cold cabbage leaves, frozen cabbage leaves, or ice. If you are nursing, they might get engorged because all the milk has come in, or because the baby's latching and the latch can hurt. So again, in those cases, you want to make sure that you're having ibuprofen and that you are using heat. I would say lactation consultants sometimes say heat and cold, so you should listen to them because they have a lot of know-how. But heat tends to soothe it and kind of dilate the blood supply and make things less engorged and less likelihood of mastitis. There's a little controversy in that. Again, I should use heat. There's data on both sides of the map. So the truth is, maybe both work. Talk to your lactation consultant or your doctor. What are the other things that happen? To me, the emotional part, like you think you're going to be filled with bliss because you've been waiting for this baby. Either it's your first spontaneous, easy delivery, you were so happy, this was the best thing in the world, everything went according to plan, or you've had losses, you've had challenges, and even more so than you think, I wanted nothing more than to hold this little baby. And then you get home and you are filled with a labile up and down, where 1 minute you are on top of the world, this is the best thing ever, and 2 seconds later you are weeping and crying in a puddle of tears for no apparent reason, and you have no ability to control it. And again, it's your hormones, and it's very natural, and it's very normal. And please resist the urge to think that everything you see on Instagram where everyone says is perfect, resist the urge to think that's true. Resist the urge to listen to your friends who might be either unicorns or liars and tell you that every moment postpartum is bliss, especially 3 in the morning when you are nursing that little angel cherub. It's not always bliss, especially at 3 in the morning. And I'm used to 3 in the morning with my job. As I always said, 3 in the morning, still not a time I want my baby to be awake, but of course, your baby's gonna be awake. And what can happen, and happened to me absolutely, for me it was about day 11 or 12, right when my first son came home from the NICU, and I was sleep deprived despite him being in the NICU, because I would wake up like a crazy person. And I remember in that one moment hating him for a second because he was crying. He had no reason to cry in my mind. He was already bathed and fed and changed and all the things. And I was like, what can I do to stop this? Why are you crying? And I felt anger, maybe even hatred in that moment towards him. Immediately followed by guilt, and if you know me, you know how much I hate guilt. And so of course I call my sister, like, I'm an ogre, I hated on my innocent baby. And she said, oh, everybody does that, not a big deal. And I thought, why hasn't anyone told me this? I had only been in practice for a year at that point. I did not know that. And now I try to tell all the moms, and any moms I haven't told, first time moms, I am sorry that I haven't told you that day 10 through 12 you might hate your little cherub baby, and you think you're the only one on earth and you don't want to admit it to everyone. We all feel it. If you don't feel it, God bless you. If you do feel it, it's normal. You don't really hate your baby. You love that baby. But the sleep will make you crazy when you lack sleep. So the other thing I tell patients is anyone that you trust with arms is a good human for you to allow to hold your baby for a couple hours, provided they are masked and or vaxxed during the COVID. If you're watching this years from now and you don't know what COVID is, then thank God. But I really think that the best thing you can do for yourself is allow yourself / force yourself / convince yourself the truth, which is you need sleep. If you can get a 3 to 4 hour chunk, even once a day would be amazing, but once every 2 or 3 days, still great, then you will feel somewhat human. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is eye patch, earplugs, and that human that you trust who has arms, who might just be your birth partner, and you guys tag team on and off, or it might be a parent or an aunt or an uncle or a baby nurse or a doula or someone that you've paid. And there's no shame in that. Back in the day, when women did it all, they didn't do all on their own. They did it with a village of people, typically a group of women who were there to help them. And the mom's only job mainly was to feed and nurse and then be nurtured by this village of women. And now we don't have that. So women are made to feel bad and guilty and less than if they can sign help. If they're lucky enough to have a mother or a sister or best friends who can come visit, it's wonderful. But when you don't have that, or maybe you have a contentious relationship where you don't want that in your house, and you have the privilege of paying for someone to help you, you should not feel less than. Unfortunately, so many women don't have that privilege, and we need to figure out better ways to help them if they don't have that village of even 1 or 2 other women to aid them in just the logistics of how you care for a baby, because it's exhausting. So now, as far as care for your incision, if you had a C-section, or your vagina, if you delivered vaginally, let's talk incision first. I tell all my patients, please get a heating pad and drape it over your abdomen, because you will potentially have gas and an inability to poop. So taking Mylicon, which is the same as Gas-X, can help, and it's safe for nursing. Making sure you're keeping up with your pain medicine regimen that we'll talk about, and heat. Heat, again, dilates the blood supply, even to your bowels. If you keep it on your belly, that will help things move ahead, and it's soothing. Plus, if you put it on your incision without burning your skin, it will also potentially help it heal. Just like we say, if you have a pimple or a boil, put heat on it. to vasodilate and bring in all those cofactors. If you had a vaginal delivery, you might need ice, because that is not where you want the blood supply to be dilated. You want the swelling to go down, and ice will decrease that swelling. So for that first 24 hours, they'll give you ice at the hospital. When you go home, you might not need ice, but it might be soothing to put some ice down there. And not sitting where you're putting a lot of pressure into your perineum is very valuable, because you might also get hemorrhoids from having a C-section or a vaginal delivery. And the best way to take care of hemorrhoids, in my opinion, wash with soap and water, especially if they give you that little squirty bottle, pat it dry, and then put a big glob of cortisone on your finger and shove that right up into your rectum. I know, I said rectum. Put it right up in there, because that hemorrhoid is inflamed. And if all you do is take thousands of baby wipes to wash it and wipe it, you're gonna inflame it further. So instead of wiping with baby wipes, I want you to wash with soap and water, pat it dry, and a big glob of cortisone cream right up in there, okay? Now, pain medicine. Ideally, if you can get on a regimen of ibuprofen, Tylenol, ibuprofen, acetaminophen. Ibuprofen is Motrin and Advil. Tylenol is acetaminophen. So ibuprofen, acetaminophen. And you switch that so that you're doing every 6 hours of ibuprofen, 600 to 800 milligrams, safe for nursing. And then 2 extra strength acetaminophen, which is Tylenol, also every 6 hours, so that every 3 hours you're getting something. So you alternate it. That is often enough so that you don't need any other pain medicine or any other narcotic. But especially if you had a C-section or a really challenging vaginal delivery, you might still need some narcotic, like oxycodone, things like that. And if you do need a little, that's okay. The downside, besides being addicted, which is rare in our world, we don't see it very often because we don't give very much for very long. But the downside is that you can get constipated from the oxycodone, and you could also feel very dizzy. So those patients who can try to be really ahead of their pain medicine regimen by doing ibuprofen, Tylenol, alternating, can often only need the narcotic for that couple of days in the hospital maybe, and then go home without it. No shame or harm if you do need some of it. So do not feel bad. Okay, that's all I got. That's all I can think of for those postpartum, post-C-section, post-vaginal delivery days. The biggest thing is, as I just said to a young mama, give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself. Do not feel the pressure to do a baby book and get out baby announcements and cook and clean and all that stuff. Take help when you can get it. Let yourself sleep, because sleep is probably the one thing that will help your mood more than anything. Plus, sleep helps you heal physically and emotionally. And just remind yourself, these days will pass. Don't feel bad about it. Resist the urge for people to be like, the days are going to pass, that you're going to miss them. I do not miss them, but I'm glad I went through them. And that's okay not to miss them as well. There are little nuggets I miss, but I wouldn't go back to it. And that's okay. It was still beautiful. Okay. Have a great day. It is Indigenous Peoples Day. I am working today. I hope you are not. Bye.